I did catch up on a lot of the movies that you've already seen. I watched Tick Tick Boom, I watched Passing, and last night I watched West Side Story, which I loved.
Yeah,
I
right?
absolutely loved it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right.
And Steph and I watched the the 1961 West Side Story, and I found myself kind of like making fun of it, I guess. And I don't know if there's that much of a difference, but it just seemed, I think that it's probably the technology in use in this movie, that it's a more contemporary movie that allowed me to kind of, be more into it, and it didn't, the staginess didn't take away from the experience for me. It felt like a movie, felt like a film, but it also felt like a heightened reality. And so all of that together just kind of worked. And the music worked, and the choreography was amazing. And I don't know if there's too much of a difference in the new choreography versus the old choreography. And I did a little bit of reading. I know there's like things that are in different places, and of course there's new characters. Rita Moreno plays one of them. So I know it's not a 1-for-1, shot-for-shot Gus Van Sant psycho remake of of West Side Story, but it still holds together and is structured in a very similar way. But I absolutely loved it. I thought that the cinematography was great. I thought that the sound mixing was amazing, and I thought the performances were awesome too. So you've kind of held back on, I mean, I know you said that you enjoyed it, but like we haven't really talked about it at all. So
No, I told you I cried like a baby from the beginning to the end of it. I just couldn't get over how spectacular it was. Now, part of that is that I've been going through some physical stuff, so to actually sit for 2 hours in the theater has been more than complicated sometimes, and so it was nice to actually be able to sit through something and not be concerned with that. It was a little shocking, but it was also enjoyable. What you're talking about with maybe the difference between the 1961 version and this version is that not that there's not beauty in the 1961 version. There is. There's a lot of spectacular stuff, but Spielberg gave everything purpose in this film. The 1961's opening song is about the Jets. Right. And it's just to establish the Jets' territory. And it's done like that on stage, and it's a song about that. In the Spielberg version, it's a song about one culture taking over another culture's, and there's a clash, and it's established immediately. And then the Jets do something violent, which causes that conflict. They do something that causes that opening fight, riot, brawl, whatever you want to call it. So it seems less cheesy when they're dancing down the street, because they're doing it with purpose. They take a sign down, they steal paintbrushes, they come out of with paint buckets. There's a few Jets that are doing a few things on the streets. It's all got purpose. It all has purpose. So it takes that cheeseball transposing of a musical to a film away. It takes it away, gives it purpose. And when you open a movie with the scenery and the neighborhood versus... Because that's how it starts in the 1961. I mean, literally, it does that kind of kaleidoscope thing with the different alleyways and clothes hanging from the alleys and stuff like that. But then immediately you see somebody doing that. It's not that you want to make fun of it. It just makes you a little uncomfortable because there's no purpose behind it immediately. In this one, from the get-go, it has purpose. And I think that has a lot to do with Tony Kirshner's screenplay. I think he went in there and gave everybody a reason to be there, including Rita Moreno, who is now
Doc's wife. Yeah.
Doc's wife, but she is Doc.
Well, Doc's gone, so
yeah.
she's the proprietor of the store, so she is Doc.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, Valentina, I think was her character name. But yeah, so the one scene that kind of just like solidified it for me, where I was like, okay, I know, of course I knew I was in good hands because he's Steven Spielberg. He directed my favorite movie of all time. So that right there, I know I'm in good hands. But the scene where it's at the dance and Tony meets Maria and they go behind the bleachers and there's these lights, and I was like, oh, that lighting is it. Steph and I were watching it together, and I was like, that lighting is interesting, and it's just like this pristine area behind the bleachers, and everybody's lit, both of them are lit perfectly, and they have a nice little dance scene. And then the moment when there's like a break in their connection and they kind of like get crashed back into the real world, you see that there's just like old sweaters and like deflated basketballs, and those lights aren't there, and it's just like them seeing each other and meeting for the first time created this surreal world, this magical movie world, and then they were crashed back down to reality. And so that's a perfect way of doing that. That's a visual way of doing that. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is gonna be real good. And then we get the I Want to Be in America scene, and Ariana DeBose is just like killing it throughout the whole movie. And she has some really tough scenes. And I know that, that Rita Moreno did in the 1961 version too, and she won an Academy Award for it and all of that. But I think that Ariana DeBose does a good job of selling it. What might seem to be really difficult character moments, you're like, I can see how she might get there. But yeah, it's all very fantastical, but I didn't have a problem with it. I loved it.
Well, he doesn't apologize for it being a musical either. He doesn't try to make it inside your mind's eye or inside the illusion of somebody who's passed out or given a reason for. He doesn't give you any permission to accept the reality of the world. You either accept it or you don't. And I think that's good, because now we're under the impression that you have to do that you have to give a reason for a character to just break out in song. Chicago, it's inside Renee Zellweger's character's head. I mean, there's all these ways there's all these vehicles that you can go into these worlds. But Spielberg's like, it's a musical. They're going to sing and dance. Get over it. And then the jets are very strong and very cool. And then they do that kind of like smooth swing across the street, and I'm
like a ballet move. Yeah,
so cool too, though. As for Ariana DeBose, here's what perplexes me. Okay, so she can sing, she can dance, she can act. First of all, in that scene in the beginning when he's talking about
Bernardo.
Yes, Bernardo's talking about going back, and she's like, and he wants like 6 kids or something like that.
6 kids, yeah.
Go back and listen to her line reading in that. It's so layered, because it's not only like, I'm still a kid myself, and we just got away from that, and that's not how they do things here. And excuse me, I'm my own person, and you can be all like the leader of the pack and be all like Mr. Muscle and be all like Mr. Masculinity, but back up. That line reading, I was like, wait, there's so much there. Then you have to sing, you have to dance, you have to pretty much be in your first movie, and it's a Steven Spielberg movie, and you're recreating a role that has been recreated 1,000 times at this point, if not many more. It won somebody an Academy Award. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to take the most intense scene that you have to do, and we're going to add the person who won the Oscar for doing that intense scene originally into the scene that you have to end it speaking to her. What? And she handles it beautifully. It is a stunning performance. She has won everything. They are saying she's locked and loaded for the Oscar, and I have absolutely no problem with it. At this point, I hope she does win, because she's won everything else. I mean, the BAFTA still has to come. Mm-hmm. And there can be a swing, and somebody else could end up winning it. But also, the idea that somebody's going to win an Oscar for a role that somebody's already won an Oscar for, I don't think has ever happened before. So that's thrilling to me. And she's going to deserve every ounce of that gold statue. every ounce of it, because she is a powerhouse. Everybody's great. I've talked about Michael Feist, who plays Riff, many, many times. I think Tony and Maria are good. The only scene I'm not a big fan of is Tony's dance scene off by the docks when they're, I forget what song they're singing. I'm not a huge fan of that particular song and movement and the way that they handled it. But that has a lot to do with, I don't know, it's almost like they wanted to toughen Tony up a little bit, which has always been a criticism of Tony, that he is a little less believable as a gangster than...
But didn't they toughen him up enough by saying he almost killed a guy?
Yeah, and he went to jail.
Sending him to jail?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, nobody else in that movie had been sent to jail for almost killing someone. I mean, that's, as far as like quote unquote tough is concerned, that is, I mean, that's not just a guy who doesn't want to brawl. You know, that's a guy who has seen the repercussions of that to another person, what he did to another person, and he never wants to do that again. But then, you know, he is put into a situation that he has to make that choice again, and he, you know, spoilers for a William Shakespeare play, does it again, you know, beat somebody else up, you know, in a more severely even. So that, yeah, I don't know. That, are people now saying that he's not tough enough, or is that just like a thing from the past?
No, it's a thing from the past, and I think they've improved it. And I like the fact that he's trying to fight against his past, his history. He's trying to do better even before he meets Maria. And the last thing I'll say is, if you had told me that Rita Moreno was going to be in this and that she was going to be Doc, or she was going to be married to Doc, and then he was going to die, and then she was going to take over the store, and she was basically going to become Doc, and then she was going to sing the most famous duet of all time, I would have been like, why are they doing that? But it is beautiful. And her sitting at that table singing that song is stunning. And a lot of people talked about her getting a nomination also. And what fun would that have been? For getting
I mean, it's cute.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm not saying she wouldn't have deserved it. In a lighter year, she could have easily gotten a nomination, because she really handles that song. True. She handles that song. I forgot that it was a duet, and I forgot that it's as beautiful as it is with two people singing it, and they simplified it. They brought it back down, and they just let her sing it, and it is beautiful. So yeah, high praise for West Side Story. I would love to see it all of a sudden sweep. Best Director, Best Picture. I'm not saying that will happen, and that's not necessarily my pick, but that would be an interesting historical pick, because you have the, you know, it won Best Picture, won Best Director, that kind of stuff.
Some of the down the ballot, you know, ones like costume design, sound even. I mean, I think Dune's going to win sound, but some of those I could see a case to be made for those, for that. And so that would be interesting. And I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that, but,
well, they're going back, sorry to interrupt you, but they're going back and forth because they can't really figure out what's the front runner for Best Picture at this point, because there isn't one. And so now Coda just won the SAG Awards, which would be amazing if it won Best Picture. But wouldn't it be really neat if Jane Campion won Best Director and West Side Story won Best Picture, or vice versa? Like, it would be really surprising to see Power of the Dog win Best Picture and Spielberg win Best Director. And you know what? You can't fight it. He will have deserved it. And trivia, Spielberg won his Oscar for Schindler's List when Jane Campion was nominated for The Piano.
For Piano?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So this would be a little bit of a role reversal, if you will, if she wins.
And he's only won one Best Director, right? Or no, he won one for Saving Private Ryan?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Okay. So you saw a bunch of movies. I want to get your take on Nightmare Alley. How did you like it?
Did you see it?
Yep.
Okay, so I wrote down things this week. Surprise, surprise. Ooh. Yeah, you don't want to do the introduction. You want to do this improv thing. You know, now we're Canadian and we're in Second City all of a sudden. And I'm like, what is happening, Josh, Mr. Wrote? So I actually wrote things down because I just wanted to make a couple real quick points about it and to be clear about it. The first, second, and third act of Nightmare Alley seem like three totally different films. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The ending kind of solidifies it a little bit for me. Production value-wise, it's beautiful. Cate Blanchett's office is stunning. I just want to look at that in HD. I just want to take a tour of that.
I want to look at Cate Blanchett in that office.
Yeah.
That's what I want to look at.
What is with her side eye? Can she give some side eye or what? When she does that, she does it like 4 times in the movie. And one time it's seductive, and one time it's like, be careful what you wish for. And one time's like, I'm going to murder you. And the other time is, I've got the better of you. And she also does it when she's scared too. What can't she do? So I did not gel with this movie. I have to see it again. It was hard for me to keep focused on it. I think when you have the cast, Ron Perlman, Toni Collette, Rooney Mara, when you have all of these people, then use them.
David Strathairn.
Yep. Use them. And they do, but then they become unimportant in the second act. You know, when he becomes Mr. Magical Person. What was the other thing I wrote down? Richard Jenkins, always great. Always great. Almost saves the film for me, even though he's playing a completely different character than what we're used to, but he's superb in this. Bradley Cooper, I hate to say it because we don't normally talk about things like this, but I think he aged out of the role. I think he's about 10 years too old for the role. And because they keep talking about how he's the younger guy and he's the younger guy. And I'm like, how old is Bradley Cooper? Because he looks too old to be playing that 25-year-old guy who burns his house down and then leaves. He's 47. Now, I'm older than him. I'm not all about ageism, but something about it just he's great in it. He's really great. And I think he overcame the age issue. But
do you know who was supposed to star in this movie?
No, but I'm sure when you tell me, okay, here's who I would have cast. Oh shoot, his name just went out of my head. The Greatest Showman, not Hugh Jackman, Zac
Efron.
Yes, thank you. That's who I would have cast.
Okay, well that would have been interesting. Yeah. No, it was supposed to be Leonardo DiCaprio.
When they were making it 10 years ago?
No, I mean, whenever he had funding for it recently. So this was one of 2 movies where Leonardo DiCaprio decided to do Killers of the Flower Moon, and he pieced out of this movie and also the John Peters character in Licorice Pizza, and Bradley Cooper got both of those roles. So, I mean, obviously one of them was like a 5-day role or whatever, but the other one was, is a starring role in a movie. So,
well, I think Bradley Cooper worked it out. He's great in both of those movies. It would have been, in my opinion, it would have been more interesting to see Leo do John Peters. That seems a little bit unexpected. Bradley Cooper being a little creepy and a little intense doesn't seem so unexpected. And I think Bradley Cooper was great in this. I just think that he just seemed too mature to play that kind of naive character in the beginning. Just something about it. And maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe they wanted somebody with some seeming age on them, because I don't know. It just seemed not a complete fit for me. So overall, I didn't feel like it was a Guillermo del Toro film. There is hardly any of his thumbprints on this film for me. That said,
the extremely accurate violence, the accurate depiction of violence, that's Guillermo del Toro. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, okay. I think he's coming from horror in a lot of his other movies, but this isn't necessarily horror. It's more, it's more
thriller, just suspense.
Yeah, and I think it's like in some ways you could call it a horror of the mind type of a thing. Like, what is man capable of? That whole subgenre, and of course this is a revision on. There was already a movie in the, I think, late 40s, early 50s with Tyrone Power, and it's based on a book from before then, from the 30s. So I mean, yeah, it's not like he's retreading things that have come before, but I think he does put his own kind of little spin on it. But I think that for me, it sharply declines, like you said, in the third act. It just kind of falls apart actually, and it doesn't hold together. But I think that David Strathairn, Cate Blanchett, like I think they crushed it, and I think you're right, Richard Jenkins. You just expect him to bring something to like this. He's such a depraved human being, but he's Richard Jenkins. So you're like fighting not to like him.
Right.
And you're like, why do I still want to like this person?
Absolutely.
And it's because he has this like humanistic capability to imbue a character with that. It doesn't matter what the character is or what the character's done. So that's huge. But yeah, everything else gets a little muddled by the end. But yeah. So.
I had to remind myself at the end of the film why that was so impactful. What was getting ready to happen to Bradley Cooper's character. I had to go.
You could kind of see it.
I couldn't. I wish I could have.
Yeah.
I would have been much more interesting to me. There's just some weird kind of. It's not tonal because the tone is even throughout the film. It's just something about. I would have rather have seen how Toni Collette became Toni Collette in this film, how she became the character in this film. I would have rather have seen how does she have a house on the side of the road with electricity right next to a traveling circus? Like, well, how does that work? So when I start to think about things like that, I'm not in the film. And it could be one of those movies that 10 years from now, I'll watch it again and go, oh, click, 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 because it's clicking with people. I went to see Belfast at my favorite theater in Norfolk, the Narrow, and I came out of it, and somebody was talking about how they're showing a black and white version of Nightmare Alley, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And the guy was like, did you love that film? I loved it. I mean, it's amazing. It's the best of the year. And I was like, so I just simply said, oh, I think it'll be neat in black and white. Just kept walking because I don't want to ruin the guy's day. But maybe 10 years from now, we'll see.
Belfast, is that a movie that you think I could just rent, or is that something that would be beneficial to like see in the theaters?
Well, if we were talking all things even, and we weren't talking about the coronavirusville and the potential danger, if you will, then yes, I would say see it in the theater. But if you have to pick and choose what you're going to see, if you're concerned about something like that, then I would say you can rent it. And I think you'll be okay. It's a beautiful movie. It's beautiful. And a lot of people are bashing on it because we're now in that cycle of everybody's sick of hearing about these movies now. And so now everybody's picking on them, and the backlash to all these films are happening. And they're saying it's way too simple. It's not complex enough. And that it's just a memory lane for Kenneth Branagh. Yes, yes, and yes. Those are all the reasons why I loved it. It's charming. It's sweet. It has a lot of angst about it. I wasn't expecting to go from blonde-haired, blue-eyed, black and white little kid playing ball down the street. And his mother calls from the stoop, and he goes running. You see this in part of the trailer, so I'm not giving anything away. And then you see the lady on the side going, hey, your mom's calling you. And then as he's going home, he gets called by the neighbors. Hey, tell your mom this. You know, everybody knows this kid and everybody's watching out for this kid getting home. And then all of a sudden it's Sunday Bloody Sunday. And you're like, wait, Belfast, Northern Ireland. In the 50s.
The Troubles.
Yeah. I wasn't really putting that together at first, but like, how could you not? It's called Belfast. And at that time, how can you not 50s? I guess it's the 60s.
It'd be later than that, but still, yeah.
And so I don't know. I thought it was charming, and everybody's having problems with Judi Dench being nominated. I thought she was brilliant. I thought, now I can't say because the nomination happened and then I saw the movie, but I really honestly think I would have said, oh, she's going to get nominated, because she has 2 or 3 scenes that are just They're beautiful. And Kieran Hines is nominated, or Hind is nominated, and he is just, it's nice to see these characters that are just real people, that he's the backbone of the family. He's the grandfather, the pa, and he exudes grandfather advice, and he says things that you expect a grandfather in this time to be saying. And I don't think he does anything that's like this big Oscar moment, but I love that because he's such a real character. He's so well etched out. And they're not in a lot of scenes. They're just not. But they really are the backbone of this film, and it's important for their characters to be there. So yeah, I thought it was beautiful. I loved it. I came out of it charmed. I felt better about my life walking home from it. Yeah.
Well, so you wanted to hear my opinion on Spencer, because I did watch that a couple weeks ago. It's on Hulu now, and I like I said, it was not. I talked about it a little bit, I think, in one of our previous episodes, but I was not expecting to enjoy it. Well, I mean, enjoy is kind of a. I was not expecting to get through it as breezily as I did, but I think that it was shot on, I think, 16 millimeter. I mean, it just feels in a lived in way. I think that they utilized the film, and it seems like there's like smoke in all the rooms. I don't know. Like there's just something that feels of the time, even though it was only 1994 or whatever it was when this movie was set. And it's very similar to a lot of other quote unquote, biopic movies that aren't biopic movies. They're just a small section of time, a day or 2 days or a weekend or whatever, that is centered around this one character, this real person, and who is definitely a character in this film. And I think that Pablo Larraín really does take some artistic license with the things that were going on in the movie. But I think the movie is better for it. It allows you to connect with the character a lot more, and it seems like she's just this kind of like ball of angst, and the only people she can connect with are her children, and then there are fleeting not connections, but fleeting interactions with the queen and the guy who's supposed to be keeping her straight, I guess, or Timothy Spall's character, who's kind of like her, I don't know, her bodyguard guy who's like making sure she doesn't go off the reservation. But
he corrals her.
Yeah. But the other thing that I was not expecting was I was not expecting to just give in to Kristen Stewart as Princess Diana, and I did. She was flawless. I'm not an expert on accents and all that stuff, especially like specific British accents from areas of England or areas of the United Kingdom, but I did not hear the Kristen Stewart, the Twilight Kristen Stewart, or the whatever Kristen Stewart in this movie. She was gone, and maybe it was like a nose piece and a couple of extra things on her face and her hair that also allowed for that to go away. But yeah, she just became this person, and I don't really know much about Princess Diana, but I feel like I learned about this particular character in an artistic and very intense way for a short period of time, and I really enjoyed it.
I agree with you. I do have a couple of questions for you. Do you think that it's a literal interpretation of the events, or is it supposed to be, okay, so I can't remember if it's Helen Mirren when she played the Queen, or I'm having a hard time with names again tonight, played Marilyn Monroe. Brokeback Mountain, Dawson's Creek.
Michelle Williams.
Thank you. I love her. I can't believe I just
I
blanked
haven't
on
seen either of those movies. Me and Marilyn, is that what you're talking about?
My Week
Yep.
with Marilyn.
My
So
Week with
either
Marilyn, yeah.
Michelle Williams or Helen Mirren, I can't remember which one, said, "Oh, it was hard to think about playing Marilyn Monroe or the Queen, but when I realized I'm not playing Marilyn Monroe, I'm playing my version of Marilyn Monroe, how I see Marilyn Monroe." And that's what keyed her into it. And I thought, oh, that's a good way to
Mm-hmm.
interpret that. So do you think the film in general, Spencer, was a interpretation of events or a representation of the events? Because this is why I ask you. In My Week with Marilyn, I'm not giving anything away. It's in the trailer. She says to Eddie Redmayne, they're in an alleyway somewhere, and then some people discover that's Marilyn Monroe. And they start screaming at her and taking her picture and stuff. And she goes to Eddie Redmayne. She goes, "Watch. I'm going to put her on. I'm going to show them Marilyn. I'm going to transform into Marilyn, right? Should I do it? Should I do it?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course you should." And then she goes into the Maryland, and she becomes Marilyn Monroe for these fans. And do you remember the opening sequence when Kristen Stewart or Diana stopped to ask for directions?
Mm-hmm.
Did it seem like she was being more Diana at that point and purposefully being what she thought the public saw her as? Or was that supposed to let the audience know that this is a fictional interpretation of Diana's life? Because you're right. I think Kristen Stewart disappears, completely disappears. But if you were to listen to Princess Diana, there are a lot of differences with what she chose to do, with what Kristen Stewart chose to do.
Mm-hmm.
So is it a literal interpretation or a representation of events?
I think that for me, at least, it seems like Pablo Larraín is using this particular moment, who in real time that actually happened, as a jumping off point. And it's like, we know that all of the family gets together every year at this castle for Christmas, and that is where we're starting. And then we know where we have to end up. She has to leave with the kids. It's the weekend that she decides that she's divorcing Prince Charles, or at least separating from Prince Charles. So no spoilers there, but because it actually happened. But it's just that is just where that's the beginning point and the end point, and whatever happens in the middle, that's a movie. That's the thing that's where his artistic license, he's able to do whatever he wants with that. Just as long as he starts at point A and gets to point G, doesn't really matter how he gets there. He's got to get there. So that, I don't know. I mean, I don't take anything in the movie that literally. I don't know if there was a Timothy Spall character there. I don't know if they weighed each other. I mean, that could have been a complete contrivance. The whole like weighing at the beginning when you come in, and then whatever happens later on in the movie with the weighing. So it's a yeah, I don't know. I mean, the dresses that she wears, all of that stuff, I don't know if any of that was real or period accurate or historical or any of that, but it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, just as long as each of those things, like you said, contributes to the narrative of the film, that's all that matters. So,
well, the reason why it matters to me is because if it is a representation, I think when she goes to the house, her old house, and you know she's seeing ghosts and you know she's seeing memories, I think that's supposed to be a metaphor for her life is a ghost. Her life doesn't really exist like we think it does. And I think if she's going to do that breathy interpretation of Princess Diana, it's because we as the public, as people who watched her from cameras and TV, really don't know who she is. So I think that, well, she even says that in the film. She says that to Sally Hawkins at one point, they don't know who I am. And you're supposed to be thinking she's talking about the family and the Queen and Charles and all that other stuff. But I think she's talking about the public in general. Because Kristen Stewart has been praised, deservedly so for this performance, but also a little criticized because it seems unlike Diana to be so breathy and everything is so this and everything. I liked it. It made me feel like I was watching a different person. I think it's supposed to represent the fact that we might have ownership in who she is on TV, but we don't know her as a human being. And I think that's the whole issue with her in general, is that she did not know what she was getting into. She did not know that she was going to lose herself. She did not know that she had a breakfast, lunch, and dinner dress, that she had to weigh herself, which, of course, as we do know, factually speaking, because Diana has admitted to this, she had bulimia, and she had anorexia, and she had a lot of eating disorder problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so to weigh somebody who has those issues is totally, one, disrespectful and just horrific to think about. And then to weigh somebody afterwards to see how much you ate during Christmas, I bet you that's a true tradition. I bet you that's for real.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like something that they would do. That sounds like something the royal family would find funny. I would be mortified by that. I'd be like, nope, not doing it. So I think that the film, unlike Jackie, which is another Pablo Larraín film, unlike that never gelled for me. I never understood why I was watching this movie to begin with. But there was a lot of different things I could extract from Spencer and the thing that I took away from it was, why are we fixated on these people? And why are we so fixated on these people that we cannot allow them to be who they are? And don't we do this to our own lives and to our own families and to our own people in our lives? We have expectations of what people are instead of accepting them for who they are. That's why Sally Hawkins' character is such an important character, because she's the only one that represents somebody who she can be true to. And if you notice, when she's talking to her kids, to Stewart, two sons.
Harry.
Yeah, I couldn't remember their names either, but they're not as important as Michelle Williams, so I don't feel bad about that. And when she's talking to Sally Hawkins' character, the breathiness seems to subside. It goes down a little bit, and I think that's on purpose. And I think that opening sequence that I'm talking about, she's putting on Diana for the public. So she can't just walk into a pub and say, hey, can I get directions? She has to walk in and do that kind of sly, kind of shy look thing that she does. And
the woman pulling up her dress to get a ride, pulling up her skirt.
But it's psychologically even more damaging in the fact that she had to develop a whole nother persona in order for people to just see her as a human being to give her directions. Yeah. It's like, I thought to myself two things. That's sad, and thank God for GPS. Because she wouldn't have had to pull over on the road, and she would not have had to deal with it. Yeah. So I think overall it's very well drawn, and it would be nice for her to be the surprise on Oscar night, because nobody knows at this point with Best Actress. The strangest things have happened. They've split every award. Jessica Chastain just won the SAG Awards, which is usually an indication. And then last year, the BAFTAs lined up, but none of the women nominated for the Oscar are nominated for the BAFTA. Strange. So nobody knows. If she wins, she will deserve it.
Did you finish Euphoria? Because I know that the season...
Yes.
Is it the series finale or the season finale?
No, just the season.
Oh, okay. So they're going to keep going, I guess.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I like I said, I haven't kept up with it, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that or...
It's challenging. It's tough. He does some interesting things at the end of this season. And he does things that I can personally relate to, so that's always good. And I'm not going to tell you the vehicle that he uses to get the story to conclude, or at least for now to conclude. But it was clever. A bit over the top, but that show happens to be a bit over the top. There were some... The first season was definitely about Zendaya's character. The second season is definitely about all the secondary characters and what their storylines are. And some of them are heart-poundingly beautiful, and some of them are devastating, and you always have this kind of like, I don't want to look away, but I should not be watching this. I feel almost voyeuristic, and it's almost that thing in human psyche to watch a car crash. You can't look away, but you don't really want to see it. Or when you're watching a horror film and you got your hand up in front of your face, but you're looking through your fingers anyway. Or when you're a kid, if you have your foot dangling over the edge of the bed. The monster can get you, but if you have the blanket over your foot, he can't get you or she can't get you. Euphoria is like that. It's
challenging, right?
It is challenging.
See, and that's kind of where I wanted to kind of go, because I sent you, I don't know if you had the chance to read it, but there's a Reddit thread on Criterion, and I keep up with Reddit to a certain extent. It's actually the only social media, and I wouldn't even necessarily call it social media, thing that I frequent, but and it was couched in this kind of like, I like Criterion movies, I like art house movies, and then I have friends who tell me that like, oh well, these aren't for me, and I don't agree with this person, part and parcel, but I do think that they bring up some interesting things, and I think that the big things that they are bringing out is the fact that if you compare popular movies to art house movies, is that popular movies are meant to entertain and sometimes you learn something, whereas art house movies are meant to grow your understanding of the human experience and sometimes you're entertained. And so it makes me I'm trying to hone in on like, why is it that we would want to watch a Michael Haneke movie, or even to a certain extent, or like a movie about serial killers or something. It's kind of like, well, like serial killers aren't good people, but could delving into a psyche of someone who's not like you help you to understand other people in general, not necessarily like other serial killers, but just open up your myopic human experience to a larger human experience. And I think that's kind of where I go to movies seeking something new. And it could be a new camera technique, or a new film format, or a new way of using sound, but then it could also be a new way of looking at humans, a new way of looking at, I sound like a robot or an alien. I want a new way of looking at humans.
Shoe fit.
So, but yeah, and
Please
so,
explain your
but
culture
I totally
to me.
understand. I totally understand that there may be some, or Gaspar Noé films. It's like, would I be okay if I never saw a Gaspar Noé film? Probably. But then when you watch Climax, you're like, I didn't even know that this could be a thing, and so those are the types of things that kind of were kicking around in my brain after I read this. So I wanted to get your take on that. And like, why is it that we seek out challenging films, whereas other people are just kind of like, well, I mean, whatever, I don't care. Videodrome. Why would I want to watch Videodrome?
Short Bus.
Well, that too. Yeah. I mean, and he's actually in a new, John Cameron Mitchell's in a new TV show. He's playing the Tiger King guy.
Good for him.
Crazy.
Good for him. I mean, he gets Nicole Kidman an Oscar nomination, not this year, but Rabbit Hole a couple of years ago. And now
that's true.
Now he's actually acting, and he's Hedwig in the movie. Yeah. So
he was in my favorite MacGyver episode, and I didn't even know who he was. He was like an actor as a younger person too, I guess, but he's in this like MacGyver episode centering around a dorm competition, and it's crazy. But yeah, look him up, John Cameron Mitchell in MacGyver. It's a cool episode. Sorry, go on.
So when you texted me that Reddit thing, I read it, and I thought to myself, well, I don't know this person, and I think his explanation or her explanations are a good way to put it, but that's a little categorized for me.
Trite? That's
no,
kind of
I wouldn't say trite. You would say trite, and I would accept that. I'm not saying trite because this is this person's opinion, and I'm not saying you're wrong for thinking that. I get why you're saying that. My thing is, I'm not a big... I don't like pigeonholing somebody. I don't like, or pigeonholing somebody. Holding or holding? I don't like categorizing people. I don't like putting everybody in a group. As a matter of fact, strangely enough, I was trying to explain why to a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old why it's not okay to say, that's so gay. That's so gay. It's just an expression to them. And I was trying to explain to them that when you use those kind of terms, the N-word, any kind of homophobic term, any kind of sexist term, what you're doing is you're taking a big group of people and labeling them into one term. That's so gay, whatever the term might be. Whether it's straight out racist term, whether it's straight out misogynistic or sexist, or, chick, dude, babe, ma'am, sir, all fall into those categories. Those are lighter versions of what I'm talking about. But when you do that, you no longer see that person as an individual. You see them as a group of people. And it's much easier to see an individual as a group, as the gays, and make fun of them than it is to know that that's Johnny Parker who lives down the street. He just happens to be a little more effeminate than most boys his age. You no longer see him as Johnny. You see him as, that's so gay. And I was trying to explain to them that when you do that, the complete logical absurdity of that transposes into somebody like Hitler. It goes all the way down to where somebody who believes that Jewish people are not human, that idea starts with grouping people under one term. So that's a really large explanation for why I don't like to categorize people, but that's essentially how I feel. So when you say art house film, sorry to go down some darkened ways there, but that's how I feel about it. When you say art house film or you say Doctor Strange, for me, that's categorizing stuff. Okay. And we talked last week about Licorice Pizza and about the 70s and how you walked into a record store and it wasn't categorized. It was A through Z. And so I went to look for a Kiss record and saw Parliament, George Clinton and, Parliament and the Funkadelics. And I was exposed to something I would not have been exposed to because that might have been in some other section. So my point is that when you start out going, I like art house films because of this, instead of these mainstream films, you're starting to lose me immediately. Okay? And the answer to the question is, why do we like certain films more than others? Truth and empathy is all my gauge is. If I see truth in it, and I feel empathy towards a character that I might not have known before, or an understanding to a group of people that I might not have known before, it allows me to see them as individuals and allows them for me to see them as humans. And it allows me to understand that the reason why I'm feeling empathetic towards them is because we all are human beings and we all have these feelings and we have these emotions and all that other stuff. So it doesn't allow me to group them. And it doesn't allow me to disrespect them because they are fully formed human beings and individuals versus a group. So in other words, I don't know if it's that we're interested in, or at least for myself, I don't know if I'm interested more in provocative films or darker films or what was the term you just used, challenging films. I don't know if that's necessarily true for me because there's a moment in Drive My Car, which I'm getting ready to talk about, that was as impactful to me as I Am Iron Man at the end of Endgame. And the scene with Pepper and Iron Man and Spider-Man is totally heartbreaking. It's filled with emotion. And Robert Downey Jr. is spectacular in that, but that's a huge mainstream film. So how am I having the same emotional connection to Tony Stark, Iron Man, who does not exist in this real world and never will, and this character that's in Drive My Car that could very logically be my neighbor down the street? Why is that? Truth and empathy. If I feel something towards somebody and I feel like I can relate to it, even if it's on an emotional level, not necessarily circumstances or environment, if I feel like I can relate to what they're emotionally going through, then I feel like there's truth in that. So for me, that's the reason why I didn't mind that Reddit article. That was fine. That's how he explains it, or they explain it to their friends.
And I think maybe there's a difference between how do you define entertainment? Do you go to a movie to be entertained? Then how do you gauge your own entertainment? Does your entertainment need to be a minimum amount of visual stimulation or oral stimulation, or can you just be able to sit in something for a prolonged period of time? I haven't seen Drive My Car, but I do know that I've spoken to a couple people who've watched it and who are like, I was looking at my watch. And so it's like, at what point are you able to give yourself over to this type of art versus fighting against it based on how it's structured or how it's paced or how it's formed? So yeah, because if I tell somebody, yeah, you really need to see this 3-hour long movie about a guy driving in a car, once again, haven't seen it yet, and then they're like, yeah, but why? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, give it a try. Just extend yourself out there. But it's hard to, especially when you try to compete with TikTok and, YouTube videos and all that stuff. It's got to be difficult to say that, like, and maybe it's one of those things where it's like, just because other forms of art have been created and have become more popular doesn't mean that older forms of art have to go away. We still have plays, we still have, symphonies, we still have all of those
Shakespeare.
things. It's just, yeah, and it's just not as front of it's not in the cultural zeitgeist as much as it used to be. But that doesn't mean that if you like it, you won't ever be able to see it or experience it. It just means that you may have to try a little bit harder. I don't know.
Well, let me see if I can clarify how I went from Reddit to Hitler. Because I'm not exactly sure. I got to listen back to that because I think that made sense, but I'm not sure. When you said, what's entertainment? To me, that moment in Drive My Car is as entertaining as I Am Iron Man is. And because they're both truthful and I can see through to the human condition, which allows me to broaden my empathy towards a complete stranger, that doesn't allow me to go to a dark edge of life where I just categorize people, that's entertaining to me. So entertaining has this connotation that singing in the rain, and then all of a sudden they're tap dancing, and then, the skirts are flying up and they're doing their little hula dance or whatever they're doing. That's entertaining. But to me, that moment when Frances McDormand says, what's done is done in Macbeth, the tragedy of Macbeth, is as entertaining as singing in the rain to me. So maybe I'm a little weird because I did just go from Reddit to Hitler, but I think that we need to make it okay and give people permission to say, I was looking at my watch during the 3-hour.
Sure.
But then the question should be, well, why do you think you were? Why? Because we are not giving, not you and I, just people in general, this society is not, and you're right, it's not in the zeitgeist of, with TikTok and all the things that you just said. But if we give people permission to love the tragedy of Macbeth, maybe something will catch fire. And I said when we were talking about that film, I wish that it was in the forefront of our education and that was revered, that lines from Shakespeare when you're in the 8th grade. It should be revered. It should be celebrated because it does enrich your life in ways that you can't possibly imagine, and it does open your mind in ways that you can't possibly imagine. I have a hard time reading out loud. Ironically, I want to be an actor. So here, take this script and read this out loud. Never seen these words before in your life. How do I make that easier for myself? I read more. And when I have read book after book after book for 6 months, and then I pick up a script and start to read it out loud, it is easier on some level to read it out loud. Now, does that mean that I can act it? I don't know. That's a whole nother question. So we need to give permission for people to be okay with being bored by a 3-hour Japanese subtitled film. And we also need to give people permission that it's okay to love a 3-hour subtitled Japanese film. And we don't. We make it one or the other. So if you want to go to be entertained, that's cool. But entertainment means something completely different than me. To me.
Yeah. All right. So how did you like Drive My Car?
I thought it was spectacular. What did I text you? I said the hype is real. That's what I said.
Oh, yeah.
it's a beautiful film, and this is not a spoiler because you're going to learn about it in the first couple seconds of the film. I mean, it's all, when you see the movie, you're going to be like, of course Paul loved it. It's about an actor who becomes a director, and his wife, who's an actress, who becomes a screenwriter for TV. And it's about him learning his lines in his car when he drives. So later on in the film, when a couple things happen, he wants to be an hour away from rehearsal so he can learn his lines. So he can drive that hour and learn his lines. I mean, hello. It sounds a little familiar. And it's beautifully shot, and it's beautifully, purposefully paced. Did I look at my watch? No, I didn't. Because there's some interesting subplots that generate some interesting narratives. And it's all about putting on a production of Uncle Vanya. So, hello, like, which is ironically the only Chekhov play that I don't really know. And it's the one thing that I taped off of PBS Great Performances that I have not watched. I have it taped. Wow. I just haven't watched it. So I don't know how much I would have loved the movie even more if I knew that play. And the ending is beautiful, but it leaves you with a couple of questions. And so I came out of the theater, and it's a lot to take in. A lot of things happen in that film, but really, not really. I mean, it is, but it isn't. So all of the praise, all of the attention, I think is warranted. And I think it's a beautiful film. And I think you're going to enjoy it. I really do. So there goes the thing about, it's an art house film that's 3 hours long. It's Japanese, subtitled. And by the way, Japan is beautiful. Like, it's so pristine. It's amazing how beautiful that country is. Just the cities and how clean it is. It's amazing. And he drives the coolest red Saab in the world. There's a great poster. And then I'm like, that's a cool car. I mean, I'm not a car guy, but that's a cool car. So it spoke to me on a personal level, but I also think that that's just the costumes. That's just the production design, if you will. That's just what the characters do. I think if the characters were construction workers, it would have worked for me just as well, because what you learn about them, and they spend talk about character development. It's almost a little too much. It's got a lot of character development, and you almost wish you don't know as much as you do about the characters. But in the end, when it all comes down to what it's coming down to, you're like, yeah, I'm glad I know all that stuff about those people. So truth and empathy.
Cool. All right. Well, that's great. I'm excited it was just one of those things where it's like both that and West Side Story showed up recently, and I've only had a chance to watch one of them on HBO Max or
Gotta love
HBO
that.
Max.
Gotta love that. In the same week, this 3 hour
same
subtitled Japanese film and West Side Story, all at a press of your finger.
Yeah, I thought about just shotgunning it and doing like 6 hours, but yeah, that wasn't going to happen. Because West Side Story was longer than I thought. I mean, it's like 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
40 minutes, something like that. So yeah. But it's worth it. Totally worth it. So a couple of shows that I watched that I think are definitely worth mentioning, and I'll just throw them in here at the end. I did catch up on Yellow Jackets. Have you heard of that show? It's a Showtime show.
Yeah, of course I have. Yeah. Melanie Linsky.
Okay. Melanie Linsky. Oh my goodness. She's amazing.
Follow her to the end of the earth. Give me a chance.
Yeah, she's great. Oh my goodness. Yeah, she's good. There's actually some really good actors, older and younger, but look it up. Yellow Jackets. I'm not going to say too much about it other than I am afraid, like I'm invested enough in the show that I'm afraid that it's going to turn into Lost. And I was so invested in that show. And I don't think I was let down at the end of Lost as most people were, or a lot of people were, but I do feel like it never lived up to its own potential. And after seeing this first season of Yellow Jackets, I am afraid for the writers of this show, because I'm afraid they're not going to be able to land the plane.
Well, you know what they need to do? They need to know when to end it. They need to know that, like Broadchurch from England.
Like guaranteed 3 seasons or something. Or you know, you need to have a guarantee
get in,
of
get
all
out.
Of that. Yeah.
Here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end. Stick to it no matter how popular the show comes and how much money you're making. If you make a lot of money on it, that's the money you made. End it. because
Yep.
they're doing that
Move
with
on.
Ozark, and they're smart because Ozark is pushing it. And I think Euphoria needs to do that too. Maybe a third, maybe a fourth. Get in, get out. Done. So
Yeah. Well, and the last thing, last show I'll talk about is a show that both Steph and I absolutely love, and actually my sister is who turned us on to it. It's called The After Party, and it's on Apple TV Plus, and it's great. It's got a bunch of different kind of character actors, and I mean it stars Tiffany Haddish as a detective, and it's a murder Imagine Knives Out, but centered around a high school reunion 15 years later, 15 years after graduation. So that's the type of a show it is. And it's the way that they do the storytelling is every episode is a different genre. And so there's a musical, and there's an animated one, and there's a suspense film, and there's a romantic comedy, and it also stars Sam Richardson, Ike Barinholtz, Alana Glazer, Ben Schwartz. He's in a bunch of stuff. Dave Franco is in it. So I mean, these are all people you've probably seen them in things. You may not know their name, but if you look them up, you will recognize them, and they all put in great performances, and it's hilarious, and it only has middling Apple product placement, which you can kind of tell, which does kind of bug me a little bit, but whatever. I mean, I don't think that it overtakes the show, but still, you can
show
definitely notice
business.
It's true. Hold up that Coke can a little bit higher.
I mean, it's America. I don't fault people for having to, because maybe they got to hire a different actor because they had the money.
Well,
if they did
figure
this
out
Coke
good
placement,
ways. Yeah, in this show and in the After Party, they figure out good ways to use the technology narratively, and not like, let me answer this call on my iPhone. Like, they don't do that like dead-eyed, like, I'm going to put in my AirPods right now. Like, they don't do that. It's very like, we have to have these headphones, or we have we have to have some headphones, and they just happen to be Apple headphones, or I need to use my phone to spy on somebody, so I'm going to use my phone, and it happens to be an iPhone. But they definitely keep the technology within the bounds of the narrative, and it's a good show. I really enjoy it, and I think that there's like one episode left, I think, but yeah. So I recommend it. So you can just watch the whole thing.
I want to talk about one last show before, and then one last movie, and then we can move on to the end. Somebody Somewhere. Have you heard about this show? Bridget Everett is the star of it. She's a comedian. She's a singer. The two Plas brothers have writing and directing credits, and it's their show, and it's all about this 30-something-year-old woman who comes back to Kansas. It's unclear why she's back, but something happens in her family that keeps her there, and her sensibility, Bridget Everett's, that's her name? Yeah.
Everett?
Everett.
ETT. Everett, yeah.
Everett. Right, Everett. I always want to put S's on people's names and don't want to put them on other people's names, like Sally B. Hawkins and Ethan Hawke. I always say Sally B. Hawken and Ethan Hawks. Stop. Reverse that. Anyway, it's the episodes are only about 24 minutes long. It's very short, in, out. It's just got weird, quirky characters and a strange sensibility about it. And then the last thing I wanted to say, because I texted you this, is that I watched The Lost Daughter again. Now, I've seen a couple other films. In the meantime, I saw House of Gucci. That's a whole nother conversation. I finally saw Cold War. That's a whole nother conversation. I just saw...
the Pavel Pawlikowski movie?
Yes. You said that so well. I've been practicing all day, and I skipped over it. I knew it was Pavel, but I wasn't sure how to say his last name. How do you say his last name?
Pawlikowski?
Pawlikowski. I can't do it. It's going to take me a couple more rehearsals. And then I had never seen that before. And remember, we talked about it, and I said, eventually those things come into my life. And I watched it at 7 o'clock in the morning and started it before I even had my coffee. and watched it. It's only an hour and a half long, and watched it. That's how I started my day yesterday. Strange way to start your day. Beautiful way to start your day. And I finally saw Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Fun.
Oh, yeah.
And you remember how I said put Michael Pena in every Marvel movie? Put Michael Pena and Aquafina in every Marvel movie, and put Joan Baez or Joni Mitchell and David Bowie in every soundtrack. That's my conclusion. Because Aquafina, when does she not just snap? Like, everything just about her pops. And she adds so much to it. It's a fun movie. It's creative. It's visually stunning. The fights are amazing. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. So, last thing for me is I saw The Lost Daughter again. I'm in that part of the Oscar race where I've seen everything except for one thing. I've seen all the best pictures, all the nominations, acting-wise, except for Penelope Cruz and Parallel Mothers, which I will see. I don't care if I have to pay $20 to see it. I will see it. But now I'm starting to watch things again. I'm going to go see Coda again. It's coming out in the theater. I want to see that in the movies, in the actual theaters. And I watched The Lost Daughter again, not necessarily because of the Oscars, but because I thought, well, maybe this will give me an insight to what I didn't really get the first time. And it didn't. It was much more elusive. It was much more mysterious. And I don't think I understand anything about that film, but that doesn't stop me from trying to figure it out. And I've come to the conclusion that maybe that's not what we're supposed to do. And I think maybe we talked about this on the podcast when we talked about it, is that maybe we're just supposed to accept the characters for who they are instead of trying to figure out. And then you sent me a text that you said our good friend Justin, who's been our guest star a couple of times, said that he thought, spoiler alert, that she was dead at the end. Because where did the orange come from? And I was like, where did the orange come from? So that set me off in a whole nother direction for the rest of the day. And I was trying to figure it out. And then I read a bunch of reviews, and I read a bunch of reviews that's talked about the book versus the movie. And a lot of people praised Maggie Gyllenhaal, but a lot of people had a hard time with, they thought it was undetermined what she was trying to say, that it was so elusive that it left you empty compared to the book, which, I don't know, explains more, doesn't have the flashbacks. Something, the way she chose to tell the story is different than, of course, the book, but it's still intriguing. Olivia Colman is amazing in it. Jessie Buckley's amazing in it. But you know who stands out the second time? Dakota Johnson. She is mesmerizingly great in it. And because the other two are so superb, and we did talk about her, no doubt about it, but there is something. What is her deal? Like, is she part of that family for real? Does she want out of that family? Then at the end, it's thrilling and entertaining, and I empathize and I look for truth, but I'm not understanding anything that film is saying to me. But that's intriguing to me. So maybe 10 years from now, when I watch Nightmare Alley again and I watch The Lost Daughter, I go, oh, that's what it means to me. But maybe not. And I love that also.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll pretty much watch anything that Dakota Johnson does. I want to just Suspiria, this movie, like that. I just, her choices are, yeah, she's in it for the experience, I think, and to challenge herself, it seems like. So yeah, I'm there for it. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. And you can tweet us at Actor Engineer, and we're on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast, and we'll see you next time.